Good morning. Happy Easter. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Typically on Easter morning, we gather on the front lawn of our church and we release butterflies. We usually have close to 100 of them, and they're such beautiful, delicate creatures. And it's hard to remember in that moment that they were once ugly brown caterpillars. Why do we always celebrate Easter with the release of the butterflies? Because in Christianity, the butterfly symbolizes the resurrection of Christ. In a more general sense, the butterfly symbolizes the resurrection of all men. The meaning is derived from the three stages of life that are represented by the caterpillar, the chrysalis, and the butterfly, which are symbols of life, death, and resurrection. The metamorphosis of a caterpillar is absolutely fascinating. Every caterpillar instinctively knows when it's time to stop eating, to climb up and attach themselves to a branch. They hang upside down, and the ones that we get each year hang upside down in the shape of a J, and they form a chrysalis around themselves. The chrysalis stops moving, and from all appearances, it looks like the creature has died. But on a spring morning, about 10 days later, the life inside the chrysalis begins to move. The side splits open, the chrysalis is shaking violently, and a beautifully formed butterfly emerges. For hours, it'll stand there, stretching its wings, moving them up and down slowly to dry the wings. And then before you know it, the butterfly glides away, effortlessly riding the currents of the air and landing from flower to flower. Somehow, we never lose our fascination with the metamorphosis of a caterpillar into a butterfly. And perhaps that's because it is a living parable of the promise of the resurrection. According to the Gospels, after Jesus died through crucifixion, some of his followers prepared his lifeless body for burial and placed it in Joseph of Arimathea's tomb. 3 days later, the tomb was discovered empty, for Jesus' body had vanished. That empty tomb is a critical part of the resurrection account, for if Jesus' body had been recovered, then Christianity would have been falsified right as it had just begun. Since Jesus predicted his resurrection in Mark 8:31 and Luke 9:22, if he hadn't risen from the dead, they would have called him a false prophet. The report of Jesus' empty tomb rings true because the account emerges from a number of sources, and the story started spreading very quickly and very rapidly after Jesus' death. The tomb was owned by a particular person, so there's no good reason to think that Jesus' followers had mistakenly gone to the wrong tomb. And the Jewish and Roman authorities, they have the resources to search thoroughly for the actual burial place. And it's not just a matter of them going to the wrong tomb. They knew specifically whose tomb he had been placed in. On Easter morning, the disciples saw Jesus' grave clothes lying on the cold slab inside the tomb. But he was gone, much like an empty chrysalis deserted by a butterfly who's left to soar free. He is risen as he said, an angel told the disciples. And later that day, he appeared to the disciples, and then over the course of a few weeks, to as many as 500 people. 500 people. Even doubting Thomas didn't doubt for long that Jesus was really risen from the dead. According to the Apostle Paul's letters, as well as the 4 gospel accounts, Jesus appeared alive after his death on numerous occasions. These appearances of Jesus were reported to be both physical and bodily in nature. In other words, he was seen, he was heard, he was touched, not a ghost-like apparition. The resurrection appearances were also diverse and varied. Jesus appeared to men and women, to friends and to enemies, to single individuals and to small and to large groups of people, to some people on a single occasion and to some people more than once. During the day, during the night, indoors and outdoors. In Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, Paul mentions by name 2 of Jesus' apostles who said they had seen the resurrection of Christ. These 2 apostles were Peter, who was one of the original 12 apostles and was the principal spokesperson of primary Christianity, and James, the brother of Jesus, who was also an early apostolic leader. Here is the Apostle Paul's statement from his letter to the Corinthians. This is found in 1 Corinthians 15, 3 through 7, and I'm reading from the English Standard Version. For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day in accordance with the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas, then to the 12. Then he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time, most of whom are still alive, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles. While Thomas was one of the original 12 apostles, he was not among the first of Jesus' followers to see the risen Christ. Upon hearing the report from his fellow disciples concerning Jesus' bodily resurrection, he doubted the truth. The Gospel of John says that Thomas was skeptical. Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe, is recorded in John 20:25. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he looked at Thomas and he said, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." That is recorded in John 20:26 through 28. Another amazing transformation occurred in Saul of Tarsus. He was a respected first-century Hebrew scholar of the Torah, which is the law, a member of the Jewish party of the Pharisees, and a Roman citizen. This is recorded in Acts 21:37 through 22, verse 3. Fervent in his devotion to God and in his intent to protect ancient Judaism from what he perceived as false teachings, he became the central adversary of the primitive Christian church. Saul expressed his hostility towards Christians by having them arrested and inciting physical persecution and execution of believers, including Stephen. These acts are recorded in Acts 7:54 through 8:3 and Galatians 1, verses 13 through 14. Traveling on the road to Damascus to further persecute the church around AD 31 to 33, Saul underwent an extraordinary life-changing experience. According to his claim, Saul saw and spoke with the resurrected Jesus. This is recorded in Acts 9, 1 through 30, and in Acts 22, 5 through 13. Following his dramatic conversion to the movement he once hated, he took on the Gentile name Paul and became the greatest advocate of the newfound Christian faith. Paul went on to become the faith's greatest missionary, as well as the inspired author of 13 New Testament books. What caused Paul's conversion? To understand the true impact of his conversion, let's consider in modern day times what Paul's conversion during the first century to Christianity would be like. Imagine the British Prime Minister and statesman Winston Churchill becoming a member of the Nazi Party, or the American President Ronald Reagan embracing Soviet communism, or German Führer Adolf Hitler converting to the religion of Judaism. Whatever equivalent one rightly accepts, Paul's conversion to Christianity was an absolutely astounding event. But how is this extraordinary change of allegiance to be explained? According to Paul himself, the incredible transformation was due to the appearance of the resurrected Christ. The conversion of the Apostle Paul, not to mention his life and accomplishments, seems truly inexplicable apart from the fact of the resurrection. It seems the only thing that could have possibly changed Saul's incredibly negative opinion about primitive Christianity was for him to encounter its leader, Jesus of Nazareth, raised from the dead. The New Testament describes a remarkable and enduring transformation of 11 of Jesus' disciples as well. These frightened, defeated cowards after Jesus' crucifixion soon became bold preachers and in some cases became martyrs. They grew courageous enough to stand against hostile Jews and Romans, even in the face of torture. Such amazing transformation deserves an adequate explanation because human conduct and character does not change easily and it doesn't change often. But because the apostles fled and denied knowing Jesus after he was arrested, their courage in the face of persecution seems almost astonishing. The disciples attributed the strength of their newfound character to their direct personal encounter with the resurrected Jesus. And Jesus Christ's resurrection, the apostles found their reason to live and to die. In 1 Corinthians, Paul wrote to the early Christians living in the city of Corinth, "I tell you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable, and we shall be changed." That's recorded in 1 Corinthians 15:50. Are we going to become butterflies? No, but a lot better than that. Paul explains earlier in his letters, our bodies are buried in brokenness, but they will be raised in glory. They're buried in weakness, but they will be raised in strength. They're buried as natural human bodies, but they will be raised as spiritual bodies. We will have new bodies able to do unimaginably more than we can in our physical bodies. Like what? The Bible doesn't tell us exactly what it'll be like, but if Jesus was walking through walls and appearing to different people in different places and flying up to heaven, we have some clues on how amazing that's going to be. And think about again a caterpillar flying off into the sky. How can we believe in something supernatural? There's many reasons, but I'm going to share one. The prophet Isaiah wrote in detail about Christ's life and death 700 years before Jesus was born. I've never heard any convincing explanation as to how someone could get the details of another human being's life and death so accurate 7 centuries before they lived, except that it was information given to him from God. The almost incomprehensible accuracy of the Hebrew scribal tradition, how they copied their scrolls and passed them on through the centuries, was affirmed by the discovery of the book of Isaiah in the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947. The Qumran copy matched up with the earliest text at that time, which was 1,000 years younger. The text had not been tampered with and it had not been altered. So we find ourselves in an interesting situation when we come to Isaiah. We can choose either coincidence or divine revelation. Given the time that passed between Isaiah and the birth of Jesus, which was 700 years, I find coincidence impossible to believe. To my mind, the Bible has proven itself to be a supernatural book, and that's the one reason why I believe the biblical account of Christ and his resurrection is true. Jesus' resurrection is at the very heart of Christianity. Given the importance of Easter for Christians, it's appropriate for us to consider the resurrection of Jesus as the turning point of our faith. As you think about the lesson this week and as you get ready to worship with us in our church service shortly, just think about, what do you consider to be the strongest evidence for Jesus' resurrection? Those of us who saw the movie Risen this week saw the change in people that occurred when they encountered the resurrected Christ. We need to remember that he is risen. He is risen indeed. And I would like to thank thepoachedegg.net and Reflections by Ken at wordpress.com for some of the information that is contained within this lesson today. As I always release the butterflies with the kids, I always tell them this joke. They seem to like it, so here you go. As a butterfly soared overhead, one caterpillar said to the other, "You'll never get me up in one of those things." I'd like to think that as Christians, we would say to one another, how amazing it's going to be. And wow, what an experience we have to look forward to. I hope you have a wonderful Easter Sunday with your families today, and I'll see you next time. I am putting some Easter stories up on my YouTube channel. The story of Easter for children will be up there, and a few others will be added as well. So I hope you enjoy them. I hope you have a wonderful Easter. God bless.